Welcome, Ann Widdecombe. Thank you so much. It's a great honour to be speaking with you today. I was researching you. Your career is quite impressive. You were Minister for Employment and then Prisons, I believe. You became a Brexit MEP. You're an author, a TV personality, an actress, and I think I'm right in saying an animal rights campaigner. Where do
animal welfare. Animal welfare.
Yeah. Where do you find the time?
Well, I was a full-time member of Parliament, and therefore, you know, there was plenty of time to do all those things. And the other things, largely, I've been doing in retirement.
That's great. Well, mostly today, I wanted to ask you about the current Conservative Party. You famously left for the Brexit Party, now Reform. How conservative would you say the current Conservative Party is?
Well, it isn't. First of all, I did leave to join the Brexit Party. I've never joined the Reform Party because I don't actually happen to believe in proportional representation. So that was two major stumbling blocks. So I'm politically homeless, if you like. There's no Brexit Party any longer, and I'm certainly not going back to the Conservatives because they're not conservative at the moment. High tax, high spend. That's always been socialist policy, never ever conservative policy. The threat to the unity of the United Kingdom through that absolutely crazy border down the Irish Sea, which I lay firmly at Boris's door. And the betrayal of the Afghan interpreters, I couldn't even begin to rejoin the Conservative Party at the moment. Plenty of people ask me to, but I'm waiting for a Conservative Party.
Right. Yeah, so I think I know the answer to the next question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Yeah.
How disheartening is it to see a nominally Conservative government with an 80-seat majority focusing on net zero when there are slightly more pressing things to be concerned about?
Oh, it is incredibly frustrating. I mean, net zero is a nonsense anyway. Certainly in the terms currently conceived, so long as China is blasting stuff into the atmosphere. It isn't really going to make any difference if Britain, which contributes a mere 1% towards all the carbon, if Britain destroys the economy in order to get there. And I mean, by insisting that people have, you know, special types of boiler, which is going to cost an awful lot of money, by insisting that people drive special types of car, which are going to cost an awful lot of money. I cannot see that this is a conservative approach. There's no common sense. There's no proportionality above all things. I mean, you know, the very essence usually of a conservative government is proportionality and pragmatism.
Yes. And what do you think is the impetus for this? I mean, I cheered as loudly as anyone with the last election and the 80-seat majority, which I thought was going to be the sign of things to come. What do you think is driving this lack of conservatism within the party?
Well, if you actually look at the agenda, I mean, apart from getting Brexit done, there wasn't that much that was specifically conservative. I mean, the green agenda's been there for a while. Everybody's kowtowing to it. Nobody's challenging it. The only person who is challenging it at the moment is Nigel Farage, and it looks as if he's got a new cause. But everybody's just accepting that the planet is going to be destroyed if we don't take extreme measures and bankrupt ourselves in the process. Yeah. And I do not believe that. And I certainly believe that there are challenges for the preservation of the planet. But I would have thought the amount of plastic that's on the loose, particularly since COVID, is vastly more worrying than trying to control the sun and the clouds and the climate.
Yeah. Well, particularly when we've just outsourced manufacturing to China and other places, so they're doing the destruction for us.
Well, that's the hypocrisy of it. I mean, that really, it's just like we've always said, you know, or we've said for many years, at any rate, that we're not going to have nuclear energy, but we're buying France's nuclear energy. It's all of it. And it just needs a good cold dose of common sense and determination. But what's there at the moment is not a conservative government. Its preoccupations are not conservative. And I was very encouraged by the levelling up agenda, but where is it and what's happening exactly?
Yes, absolutely. On to number 10 and Boris himself. he did fall way behind in the polls. Obviously, recently we know why, with Partygate and the furore over that. They've recovered some ground, but I think according to the latest YouGov poll, they're still about 6 percentage points behind. How secure do you think Boris is in number 10 right now?
Oh, I think he's pretty secure at the moment. I mean, after all, we are engaged on the fringes of a war. And even if we're not directly fighting, it's still very much preoccupying the whole of Europe. And I do not see a distraction like Partygate unseating Boris at the moment. And indeed, I think it would be profoundly irresponsible were that to happen. We can't have a leadership election at a time when we're in international negotiations on this sort of scale. And I don't just mean Ukraine either. I mean, I'm thinking also of the EU negotiations over Northern Ireland. You don't want to turn around and say to other leaders, sorry, we can't tell you who the Prime Minister is going to be in a few months' time. We've actually got to get some stability into it.
Absolutely. You mentioned already that you feel politically homeless, but there are signs that there are some other alternative parties on the right, particularly one still feels that Nigel Farage may be tempted to dip his toe back in the water, particularly, as you say, with net zero. Do you conceive of a possibly genuine Conservative Party at some stage?
No, look, the fact of life is that in Britain, splinter groups and small parties do not prosper. I mean, it is as simple as that. They do not prosper. Even the Brexit Party, which did phenomenally well in the European elections and which did change policy, that never prospered in general elections. And they don't. And you've only got to look back to the 80s, which I appreciate now is some time ago, but it's within my active political memory, when a new centre party was formed, which was an alliance between the SDP, the Social Democratic Party, and the Libs, and they became the Lib Dems, and then, well, at the time it was just the alliance. And everybody said this is, an earthquake in British politics. They began winning by-elections. Come the general election, nada, just didn't happen. And I think we've got to be practical. There is no room for a new party for the simple reason that when people are faced with a choice in a general election, unlike by-elections, they don't want to risk the wrong government getting in because they voted for a smaller party. I wish I had a penny for the number of times people said to me on the doorstep in December 2019, I really want to vote for you and your party, but I can't because it might let Corbyn in. They were terrified by that. And that, I'm afraid, is what drives people in a general election. So I'm always very realistic about this. I say, yes, I would love for there to be a proper Conservative Party, but no new party is going anywhere.
Absolutely. The two-party system is a massive problem. But that being the case, how do we bring any pressure to bear on the current incumbents at number 10 to actually undertake some Conservative measures?
Well, you've got to ask why eventually, they finally got at least a form of Brexit done. Not the Brexit I wanted to see, but they got a form of Brexit. And you've got to ask why. And the answer was because they were being deserted in droves by their own supporters. I remember the way that Theresa May crashed in the local elections. And the signals were all coming saying, we've had enough, we're just not going on like this. Now, the similar message needs to be sent about net zero. I do not believe that Nigel is right when he's calling for a referendum on it. I stick very firmly to my view that a referendum should only ever be on constitutional matters. You can't have the government handing over, responsibility for government every 5 minutes in a referendum. So I don't want to see a referendum, but I do want to see a change of policy. And I think the only way we're going to get that change of policy is if the Conservative Party is faced with mass desertion in the face of the current policy. And it's the only way it ever works with any big party. The only way, finally, that, we had New Labour and Tony Blair and a much more moderate approach was after nearly, 18 years, but 15 years before Blair came in, 15 years of solid rejection at the polls with the public saying, don't want it, won't have it. Finally, Labour's or temporarily, at any rate, common sense. And I'm afraid the same thing now applies to Boris. He will squander his time in number 10. He's already squandering his time in number 10. He isn't producing a Conservative agenda. And if he doesn't, he's going to be deserted.
Absolutely, yeah. Just wanted to ask you a quick question about COVID, Anne. I mean, it's been a horrendous 2 years, but restrictions have finally been lifted. Overall, how do you view the government's handling of the crisis?
The fact is that no government in any country got it 100% right. This was something new. It was an immediate emergency on a vast scale, and most governments made errors, and there doesn't appear to be a single approach that you can say that worked exclusively. I don't think you can say that. Having said all of that, I think the government was phenomenally risk averse and cruel with it. The policy on care homes was a moral abomination, whereby people could not see their vulnerable elderly, weren't allowed to visit. Care home owners were acting as jailers. That was completely and utterly wrong and indefensible. We've now had the education secretary saying, no, actually, we shouldn't have locked children out of classrooms. Looking back, there are things that we can learn from it. But what I'm not going to do is to say that there was a perfect solution which Boris should have embraced. He should have been much braver. He should have been much more humane about some of the measures, much more willing to let the public make its own judgment. After all, he was making his own judgment with Partygate. Everybody was making their own judgments. I was making my own judgments, and he should have trusted the public more on that score.
Yes. That's wonderful. Just finally, Anne, it seems that the Labour Party is in a great deal of confusion at the moment over elementary biology. Do you know what a woman is?
Yeah, I know exactly what a woman is. A woman is somebody who menstruates, who produces eggs, who bears a child in the womb, who gives birth, who breastfeeds. And when I last looked, no man can do that. So I think it's quite clear what a woman is.
Yes.
What's the problem?
Well, it's interesting when I assume they think there are a few votes at stake if they pretend not to know. That's the only thing I can come up with.
What I don't understand in all this furor about trans issues is why the establishment is bowing down to the nonsense. Why MI5 and MI6 are more concerned with pronouns than they are with the defence of the country. Yeah. And it makes us look trivial. I'm pretty certain that when Putin looked across at the West, he saw a doddery old man in the White House with a deputy who's no use, whatever. He then looked across at, what used to be one of the big pillars of the defensive alliance, which was the UK. And he sees that we're obsessed with parties in number 10 and pronouns and goodness knows what else. And then he looks around and he sees something similar and he thinks, this is the moment. There's no Trump, there's no Thatcher, there's nobody of that order of magnitude of resistance standing in our way. Let's do it. I'm pretty certain he took a good long look and was scornful. And actually, I don't blame him for being scornful. I blame him for everything he's done, but not for being scornful. I'm pretty scornful.
Ann Widdecombe, thank you very much for joining us today.